Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Mets are now being linked to Austin Hayes as their potential outfield solution. And honestly, you can hear the frustration building across the entire fan base right now after everything that's happened this offseason, after all the moves they've made and all the moves they haven't made. This is where we're at. Austin Hayes, let that sink in for a minute. David Stearns has been getting crushed by Mets fans for months now. The dumpster diver label has been attached to him since he took this job, and nothing he's done recently has changed that perception. People are genuinely upset, and I can't say I blame them. When you look at what the Mets have actually accomplished this offseason versus what everyone hoped they would accomplish, there's a massive gap between expectation and reality. Let's start with what they've actually done. They replaced Pete Alonso with Jorge Polanco. That's a downgrade, plain and simple. They replaced Edwin Díaz with Devin Williams. That's also a downgrade, even though Williams is a really good pitcher. Now, look, I understand the reasoning behind not paying Alonso the kind of money he was asking for. A long-term deal into his mid-30s at his asking price was always going to be risky. The Diaz situation hurt more emotionally because of what he meant to this team and this fan base, but you can make a business case for moving on from him too. But here's the problem. When you make those kinds of moves, when you're taking steps backward with established players, you need to be taking steps forward somewhere else. You need to be adding impact talent that makes up for what you lost. The Mets haven't done that. They signed Juan Soto to that massive $765 million contract, which was incredible, but since then it's been crickets. No major additions, no big splashes, just a lot of rumors and speculation about bargain hunting. And now we're hearing about Austin Hayes. John Heyman reported that the Mets have discussed Hayes internally and have some level of interest in him. Hayes had a decent year in Cincinnati last season. He hit .266 with a .768 OPS. He's a right-handed hitter with legitimately one of the best outfield arms in baseball. The guy can throw. He's also a smart base runner, not the fastest, but knows how to take the extra base. His barrel rate is respectable. On the surface, those aren't bad numbers. But when you dig deeper, when you really look at what Austin Hayes brings to the table, there are legitimate concerns. His power production has never been consistent. His bat has been up and down throughout his career. When you pull up his Baseball Savant page, the only thing that really grades out as elite is his arm strength. Everything else is pretty average or below average. For a team that desperately needs offensive firepower, for a lineup that's lacking thunder outside of Juan Soto, is Austin Hayes really the answer? A lot of people see him as a depth piece, a fourth outfielder type, not someone you're counting on to be your everyday left fielder. And that's the frustrating part, because there are better options available. Cody Bellinger is sitting out there in free agency. Kyle Tucker is available. These are legitimate star-level talents who would immediately transform this Mets lineup. Bellinger spent most of last season in left field before getting traded to the Yankees. He hit .272 with an 8.113 OPS and posted a 5.1 WAR. He's one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball. He was the best left-handed hitter against left-handed pitching in the entire league last year. This is exactly the kind of player the Mets need. Kyle Tucker is even better. He hit .266 with an 8.41 OPS and is one of the most complete players in baseball. Yes, he only hit 22 home runs last year, but that's because he dealt with injuries and was playing half his games in that cavernous Houston outfield. When healthy, Tucker is a five-tool superstar who impacts the game in every way possible. He can handle left field without any issues. He would slot perfectly into the middle of this lineup and give the Mets another legitimate threat alongside Soto. But according to Anthony DiComo from MLB.com, those expecting Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger to land in Flushing may have their wishes fulfilled, but perhaps only if those players experience an unexpectedly light free agent market. That's not exactly the kind of aggressive pursuit you want to hear about. The report says the Mets fully intend to add an outfielder between now and opening day, but they're protecting themselves against the possibility that Carson Bench might not be immediately ready to contribute. Here's where it gets really frustrating. The Mets don't want to block Benjay long term, and they don't want to commit to an external outfielder with a lengthy contract if it's not strictly necessary. After making the difficult decision to move on from Pete Alonso, They're not eager to sign another player to a long-term deal that takes him into his mid or late 30s. David Stearns isn't philosophically opposed to long-term contracts, but several factors are working against him agreeing to another one this year. The reasoning given is that this isn't a strong free agent class overall. Last year, they gave Juan Soto a 15-year contract because they viewed him as a future Hall of Famer who reached free agency at just 26 years old. This year, no such player exists, so it's unlikely they make a splashy signing unless they can land someone on a shorter-term deal. Let's break down what's actually happening here because there are two possible explanations for this approach. The first is that David Stearns is genuinely trying to operate like a small market general manager despite working for Steve Cohen and the New York Mets. If that's the case, this is completely on Stearns. He's making decisions that don't align with the resources available to him, and something needs to change. The second possibility is that Steve Cohen feels handcuffed by the $765 million he just committed to Juan Soto. Maybe he looks at that massive number and decides he doesn't want to hand out any more long-term deals, especially with $8 billion going toward the casino development project near Citi Field. Now, I know not all of that casino money is Cohen's personal cash. I know there are partnerships involved, venture capital, all the business complexities that come with a project that size. But the timing raises questions. Cohen wants to make money off the Mets being located next to a casino. Maybe he's decided he doesn't want to keep pouring hundreds of millions into player salaries when he's got this massive development on his plate. If that's what's driving these decisions, I can understand the business logic, even if it's frustrating as a fan. But here's my fundamental issue with this entire approach. The Mets are supposed to be competing for championships. They made the playoffs last year. They had a magical run that captured the imagination of the entire city. The fan base is invested. The expectations are sky high. And what are they doing? They're downgrading at multiple positions and apparently trying to bargain hunt their way to contention. The roster doesn't look good on paper right now. The pitching staff has major question marks. Paul Sewald is fine, but he's not an elite closer. Clay Holmes is transitioning to a starting role, which is a complete unknown. Christian Scott and David Peterson have potential, but they're not proven commodities. The rotation lacks a true ace, lacks that dominant force you can count on in big games. And now the lineup is full of holes too. The power in this offense basically comes down to Juan Soto and maybe Mark Vientos if he continues developing. That's it. You're asking a 20-year-old prospect in Carson Benj to come up and immediately produce at a high level. That's an enormous amount of pressure to put on a kid, no matter how talented he is. Austin Hayes as your left field solution doesn't solve these problems. He's a fine player. He would give you solid defense and a decent bat, but he's not moving the needle. He's not the difference between contending and falling short. If Hayes is your answer in left field, if he's the best you can do, that's a problem for a team with championship aspirations. What makes this so frustrating is that Bellinger and Tucker are both available right now. These guys would instantly upgrade the roster. Bellinger on a shorter deal, maybe 4 or 5 years, would be perfect. He's 29 years old, plays excellent defense, switch hits, and absolutely crushes left-handed pitching. He would balance out the lineup and give you flexibility in the outfield. The Yankees have interest in bringing him back, which complicates things, but he's gettable if you make a competitive offer. Tucker might require more years, maybe 6 or 7, but he's worth it. He's entering his prime. He's proven he can perform at an elite level when healthy. You know, you can't tell me the Mets can't afford to give Kyle Tucker a significant contract. You can't tell me Steve Cohen, who just handed Juan Soto $750 million, suddenly can't spend more money. The philosophical stance from Stearns is what's really bothering people. He's saying they won't make another splashy signing unless it's on a shorter-term deal, and that no player in this free agent class compares to Soto. But that's moving the goalposts. Not every signing needs to be a generational talent. Sometimes you just need really good players who make your team significantly better. Bellinger and Tucker aren't Juan Soto, but they're both excellent players who would transform this roster. The excuse about not wanting to block Carson Benj doesn't hold water either. If Benj forces his way into the lineup because he's that good, you figure it out, you move people around, you create playing time. That's a luxury problem. You don't avoid signing impact players because you're worried about blocking a prospect who might not even be ready. Tucker is probably slightly more likely to consider a shorter deal than Bellinger. Maybe he'd take 3 years and bet on himself to hit free agency again at 31 if he has a monster season, but even that feels like a long shot. Tucker's going to want security. He's going to want to get paid now and not have to worry about it again. Bellinger wants 7 years to play into his late 30s on a substantial contract. These guys aren't looking for short-term prove-it deals. So where does that leave the Mets? They apparently have some level of interest in both Bellinger and Tucker, but it's not top-tier pursuit. It's more like they'll be opportunistic if the market doesn't develop the way these players hope. That's not the kind of aggressive approach you want from a team trying to maximize a championship window. The reality is this team needs one of these big outfielders. They need that kind of impact talent. The rotation is going to have growing pains with young pitchers figuring things out. The bullpen, outside of a couple guys, is uncertain. That means the offense has to carry more weight. That means you need multiple dangerous hitters who can put up big numbers and give your pitchers some breathing room. Right now, the Mets don't have that depth. They have Soto and then a lot of question marks. David Stearns is operating under some kind of philosophy that just doesn't match the expectations and resources of this organization, whether that's his own decision-making or whether he's being told to operate this way by ownership. The end result is the same. The Mets are being outworked by other teams. They're being more cautious when they should be aggressive. They're trying to find value when they should be overwhelming opponents with talent. Austin Hayes shouldn't be the primary target. He should be the backup plan if absolutely everything else falls through. The primary target should be landing one of these star outfielders and building a lineup that can compete with the Dodgers, Phillies, and Braves. The goal should be surrounding Juan Soto with enough talent that he doesn't have to carry the entire offense by himself. Will the Mets actually make it happen? Will they get creative and find a way to land Tucker or Bellinger? Or are they going to settle for someone like Austin Hayes and hope everything clicks? Based on what we've seen this offseason, it's hard to be optimistic. The track record suggests they're going to play it conservative, and that's why fans are so frustrated right now. Steve Cohen made the huge splash with Soto. He showed he was willing to spend when it mattered. But if you're not going to build a complete roster around that investment, if you're not going to add the supporting pieces necessary to contend, what was the point? You can't win a championship with one superstar and a bunch of replacement-level players. You need depth. You need multiple impact bats. You need players who can step up when things get difficult in the dog days of summer. Spring training starts in about a month. Free agency is still active. Trades are still possible. The Mets still have time to change the narrative of this offseason. But every day that passes without a significant move is another day that fans get more anxious about what this team is actually going to look like when they take the field in April. The pitching staff is going to struggle at times. The young arms are going to have ups and downs. That's just reality, which means the lineup needs to be strong enough to compensate for those struggles. Austin Hayes as your everyday left fielder on a team trying to win the World Series feels like settling. It feels like accepting mediocrity when you have the resources to demand excellence. Maybe Hayes comes in and has a career year. Maybe he surprises everyone and becomes exactly what the Mets need. But betting on that happening instead of going out and getting proven talent feels like an unnecessary risk. The Mets should be all in right now. They should be aggressive. They should be making moves that scare their division rivals. Instead, they're being mentioned in connection with depth pieces while the big names on the market sit there waiting for someone to make a serious push. That's what has the fan base so upset. That's why people are frustrated with David Stearns and questioning whether this front office has what it takes to build a championship roster. The offseason isn't over yet, but time is running out to change this trajectory.